.org/street.
Hello, folks.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Everybody hear my
Hello.
audio?
Hello, hello.
See. Hello.
Yeah, that doesn't look like him on the screen.
Doesn't look like me on the screen, does it? Let's try this.
Well,
There you
hello.
Wow.
There you go.
How's it going with everybody?
Well, pretty good so far.
Pretty good so far.
Yep.
You're in there, okay? So we'll try that too, so.
So Tim Hepburn let me know he was going to be running a little late, but I don't think we need to wait for him. I think he can join us midstream unless you want to hold off.
No, I think we're good to go.
Are we good to go?
I think so. We're 5:02.
All right. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's a little awkward on Zoom.
A little.
It works.
Adela, can you help us with the roll call?
Yes, I will. Doug Strange is present.
I'm here.
Jay Hill,
Present.
Lisa Grader,
Here.
Roy Hallberg,
Present.
LD Johnson,
Present.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
Tim Hepburn is going to be late. Anthony Ciotti,
Present.
Nick Paz.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have public comment. Did we receive any public comment or have any public comment?
I'm just checking again, and as of now, I have nothing.
Okay, did we have somebody submit something? I had somebody contact me and I told them to submit it for public comment. Did they?
You didn't submit it as public comment, right? The email that we got, it wasn't submitted as a public comment. It was more just information regarding
Okay.
bicycle signs, but she did not specify as a public comment.
Okay. Should we discuss that right now or should we discuss it, mention it right now, or should we mention it later?
Well, let's close public comment and then we can just discuss it as other items. at
Okay.
this point.
Okay, sounds good. Then we'll close that. And approval of the minutes. I think if everyone read them, I think we need a motion to approve them in a second, unless anybody has any questions or concerns.
I'll go ahead and move that we approve the corrected January minutes and approve the April minutes.
Second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Was this-
Aye.
Aye.
I beg your pardon, I wasn't looking. Who was the second? Tom?
Tom
Thank you.
Scahill. Do we need to roll call or is a common, I don't know how formal we have to be on this meeting. Council meetings, we have to do roll call now, so I don't know whether we're burdened with that same thing or not.
I haven't. No.
I think probably committee, we're okay.
Okay.
All right, then we're okay. And moving forward. So on, the next is action items. And I'm always just a little bit unclear on action items. We show none. And when I look at the minutes from the last meeting, I think there was, I mean, what I saw is what I would have called action items, but maybe I just use the term different. But there were several items that we talked about at the last meeting in the minutes that to come before us this time, but they're not here.
Some of those items are discussion items because we're not at a point where we're actually taking an action. That's why, like, the report card is under discussion. So you may be determining action items as, we're not taking a vote on anything as far as an action item.
Okay, so action items would be things that need a vote as opposed to
Discussion,
yeah, things that are
further investigation,
okay.
feedback, exactly.
Okay, sounds good. Then I think we're on to discussion items, and that starts with Tracy.
Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Sean Igo. He's the Public Works Director, and he will be we'll be working together as a team with the ATC. So we've got some power back behind me with Sean, and I'll let him take it from there.
Good evening, everyone. Afternoon, evening-ish. I've had the pleasure of meeting, obviously, Doug and Councilman Amir Davis. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Sean Igo. I'm the Director of Public Works now for the City of Laverne. I previously worked for the City of Manhattan Beach for 5.5 years. I served in a few different capacities as the utilities manager, and then recently as the maintenance manager prior to coming here. So that was over all of Public Works operations, which included water, sewer, streets, facilities, fleet, parks. So the wide gamut, the same thing we do here in Laverne. And then prior to that, I was in Monrovia for 13.5 years. So about 20 years of experience in local government. So definitely excited to be here as part of Laverne's team, and excited to be part of this ATC meeting and hopefully offer my input and knowledge to guide us in a good direction. And I'll answer any questions.
Well, I met you the other day, Sean, at the street interview. So
Yes.
I hope to, once you get acclimated, I have time to have a luncheon with you.
That would be great. I know you're a wealth of knowledge, so I appreciate it.
All right.
Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Tom.
Our Laverne Bicycle Commission coalition met with Sean a couple of weeks ago at Sal's Pizza. So I had a great chance to dialogue with him and meet him. So good to see you again, Sean.
Good to see you again, Roy. Thank you for your time.
All right. Any other questions of Sean? All right. Well, welcome, Sean. It's great to have you on board.
Doug, is this where I asked my question about the construction on White Avenue?
No, I would do that in roundtable
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
after we kind of go through the items listed. Okay, so next is the active transportation plan, and Tracy's going to give us an update on that.
No, actually, as far as we're going to the proposed trail crossing at Puddingstone. Item B.
Oh, you know what? You're right. See, here I was looking at the wrong page.
Sean doesn't get off the hook that quickly after just
I know.
introducing himself.
No.
He's got to now pitch us on an idea.
I thought you guys were done hearing me, so I guess you were here more.
That- That was my mistake. Okay, I'm on the right page now, so we're all good. Okay, so the proposed trail crossing at Puddingstone Drive. And that is Sean, so we're not done with Sean yet.
Almost.
No, we have years to go, Sean. Keep talking.
Very true, very true. We're just trying to pull up the screen here. Can everyone see the overview of the Puddingstone Drive crossing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is a proposal that came to us from actually LA County Parks and Recs. They are responsible for the bike trail. I think that some of you do use the Marshall Canyon Channel as a bike trail. They had received a few complaints about some hazards within the channel regarding algae buildup and things like that, which makes sense. It's a active storm channel, and so they are going to have that algae buildup. So as an option, they wanted to bring for this portion the trail above ground, and with that they had to put a crossing there on Puddingstone Drive. So as you can see, they have a couple of trail warning signs they are proposing. Some of the suggestions that I recommended to them were possibly some lighted or flashing lights when people are crossing, just as a preventative measure for some additional safety measures for people that are crossing. So again, this is something that's still in the works. From my understanding, they're about a year and a half to 2 years out before they even get this done, because they're trying to get it funded. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity to bring this to the committee and get their thoughts and their opinions about what this would look like, any other safety measures they may think could be warranted in this area. But again, we're in my opinion, we're taking one hazard and in generally we're potentially creating another one by creating this crossing. So we just need to make sure that if we do this, that all of the safety precautions are put in place, because this will be different to drivers. And so for the county, they're going to need to put up some message boards saying that this change is coming and to be aware of this new crossing. So with that, I'll open it up to the committee for any questions or thoughts.
I have a couple of questions, concerns on this. I presume that should it be lighted, it will be a solar powered or something?
Correct.
Okay. And with all respect to bicyclists and those that may be using this trail, they may have a presumed aura of protection now that they've got signs and a painted crossing, and maybe somewhat lackadaisical in doing their own diligent view of approaching traffic. So a lot of times when these are provided, they have an assumption of protection. So obviously they're going to have to take their own diligence and be adult about it. And then lastly, I see a potential for them to circumvent crossing the trail where it's delineated and going to the gate further west on Puddingstone and getting back on the trail at that gate opening there. And that's their own decision if they want to, I presume. But, perhaps if that gate were beefed up so they couldn't just go around it, would prevent them from going on to Puddingstone itself.
Yeah.
Why?
Go ahead, Doug.
I guess my question is, why would we prevent cyclists from going on to Puddingstone?
Well, we're advising, or not we, but the county's advising them of the trail. And if they venture off of it, obviously they're, assuming their own risk factor there. So.
Well, Puddingstone is designated as a bicycle route in our own active transportation plan. So
Sure.
it seems like it would be actually a good way to get to Pudding Stone Drive. And obviously Pudding Stone Drive has high bicycle usage.
Oh, yeah.
today.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have one. I agree with LD. It appears, and Sean, it appears to be a dangerous area right there. And I think north and southbound bicyclists should have some kind of a mechanism that triggers a mid-block crossing right at where the hatches are. Therefore, the cars coming from westbound to eastbound, coming around a slight curve, will have time to see a stoplight, slow them down and stop them both ways. This way, bicyclists can cross without being a hood over them, basically.
Okay.
I've got a question. Is that area just to the right that's encircled in a block wall or whatever? Is that the pump station or where is this?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's the lift station.
Okay, so that's, okay. I know the area then. I agree with I travel this area a lot to get to Pudding Stone on my mountain bike. And I agree with what LD said, that bicyclists will more than likely just go right through there, not paying attention to the traffic. I think that there's got to be some sort of a warning or something for both the cars and the bicyclists that somebody's going to cross. I can see somebody going right through that and not stopping.
You know, we have the mid-block crossing over there at the University of Laverne on 3rd Street, right by the PD. And that's a pretty good mechanism for keeping people safe crossing the crosswalk. Unfortunately, this has a little bit of curvature on the road there. And I think the county needs to look at funding a mid-block crossing light. And I believe Claremont has one on Arrow Highway, just east of Indian Hill. I think it's Indian Hill, yeah. I think it works very well.
Well, this area is prone to high-speed traffic.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the bicyclists won't get much warning, nor will the motorized vehicles.
Yeah.
So this is Clay. Hey, I'm looking at this area and I'm looking at bicyclists actually, hauling butt down that area, or either direction. Maybe this is something that those bicyclists need to be slowed down. Maybe there's such a thing as a bicycle speed bump, and then there should be a stop for those bicyclists at this point. Even if we were to get signalized in there at some point, that's great. But maybe now it needs to have them stop completely and look both directions instead of traveling down there, not being aware and crossing over that and getting hit. Maybe it's something that we slow them down, stop them, and then they proceed at their own risk versus them taking a chance of somebody not paying attention or somebody just going through, driving through it at a higher rate of speed. Maybe it's necessary that the bicyclist stops and looks both directions and moves on, and maybe it's our job to slow them down to get them to stop. Just my thought.
My thought is the only thing I can see immediately is directly under where it's labeled Pudding Stone Drive. There's an area of brush that could be, there could be some brush clearance in there that would increase the line of sight for the traffic as well as for those using the trail. Just to give somebody a couple second heads up whether traffic is proceeding on there or not. And if the trail warning signs that are marked could be, as you mentioned, a flashing sign, giving a 200-foot warning to any motorist that there is a crossing coming up.
Well, the county is just presenting us with this for just conceptual approval or what?
It's not even conceptual approval. This is just their first attempt at what they want to do. So they just came to me and asked, our thoughts and opinions on it. And so again, I thought it was just, a good opportunity to bring it to ATC again, just to flush this out. And so again, with them being a year and a half to 2 years out before this even happens, it gives us an opportunity to reach out to them and give them some thoughts and ideas that we may have and suggestions, stating, you know, like the brush clearance, ensuring that we do have, you know, lighting of some sort. So even if we do push button crossing, where it flashes when someone's crossing at the actual crosswalk, those type of things, those are recommendations that we can always give to them. Whether or not they put them in place, it's another story. But obviously, this is within our right of way, so they're going to need our approval. But again, anything that we bring to them, it's going to have to be funded through whatever grant or monies they come up with. That's why they're so far out. So again, you know, any other suggestions that we have, we can take to them and they can come back to us. This is very much a preliminary design.
So is the bridge right there, is that the bridge that Laverne's been looking at improving and enhancing on Pudding Stone Drive?
No.
No, it's further east.
Oh, is it further east? Okay. I guess then I think the idea of having some kind of active flashing or you know, not just not roadway signs, but that mid-block warning mechanism, even if it were to go for both the bicyclists and the cars, would be helpful, so that the flashing lights when there's somebody approaching from either direction or from any of those four directions would be helpful, I think. But that'd be just something to throw out to the county to see if that would help.
I have some thoughts about this, and I drove over there and looked at it and rode my bike around it. And I have kind of some mixed feelings on it. The one is the current state is really dangerous. So let me just put out here, if the county will put in like flashing beacons when cyclists are approaching, and they look at, how that's done other places, I think it's always better if it's triggered by a cyclist, than if you make them go push a button and sit and wait. But and you can, oftentimes on multi-use paths, you'll see that where the bike will trigger it. So by the time they get there, the cars, have been warned. But so I'm a fan of that. But I do want to point out the current situation is not good. And so, the Marshall Canyon is the centerpiece of our active transportation plan. So when we recommended it, I think we all endorsed this being improved and used more. And being in the wash is flat out dangerous. And I know of multiple people who've, the high school team tries to use it. They've had concussions and broken bones going through it. I won't ride through it. I certainly wouldn't take my family through it. It's way too scary and way too dangerous. The alternative is to put them out on Wheeler. And this is not just a bicycle path, right? It's a multi-use path. But if we put them out on Wheeler, we have no crosswalks. In fact, crossing is forbidden at the intersection of Wheeler and Pudding Stone. So we really do need a better solution in this area. I think doing nothing is probably not okay. I think I do want to point out that we have lots of uncontrolled crossings of this trail in Laverne where there's far greater use than here. So it crosses at Palmyra, it crosses at 3rd Street, it crosses at 5th Street, it crosses Baseline, a 40-mile-an-hour road with no controls. It crosses Lemonwood and it crosses Orangewood. So I'm a fan, and in our active transportation plan, we said we should improve all of those, and I agree. I'm not saying do nothing because we've done nothing, at all those other places. I'm saying improving this would be consistent with what we said in the active transportation plan, that all these crossings should be improved. Pudding Stone Drive is one of the 2 streets listed in the active transportation plan as a class 3 bicycle route, saying it's safe for bicycles to be out on the roadway with the cars. And so I think when we say it's a really dangerous street to cross, it makes me wonder if it's really really a class 3 bicycle route where it's safe for the bicyclists to be sharing the road with the cars in itself. And that's just kind of an open question. But I think we need to be consistent about that.
So Doug, does that ATP that you're speaking of, does that just take it to Wheeler Avenue, or does it take it westbound on Puddingstone, west of Wheeler?
No, in the active transportation plan, it says we have 2 class 3s. One is from Wheeler to the city boundary, which is this area here. And so I had questioned that, but I think we'll come back to that later when we really dig into the adoption of the plan in more detail, because, but I'm just saying there's kind of a little bit of a disconnect there. And so when I look at it, it felt like, yeah, this seems, the things that the county proposed, they seem to be fairly reasonable. I'm with Tom, although I parked right near where those bushes were. And when I was on my bike, I had good line of sight. It's not that obvious from this picture here, but there's actually a turnout there. So there's kind of a long line of visibility. But the bushes, I did make a note that the bushes, you see 3 bushes there that are on the northwest corner, and those do block the view of oncoming traffic. And so I made a note that those should be trimmed or removed. And then consistent with what I think Clay and LD and the others have said, I think there should be something, to the warning signs just shouldn't be to the cars, they should be to the cyclist as well. So whether that be signs that say warning, cross traffic doesn't stop, or, or whether it be something more rigorous than that. I did think there should be signs for the trail users as well, warning them that they're going to be on a road where people weren't required to stop. And then if the county wants to put in, flashing beacons or something, great. But I wouldn't do nothing if they didn't do that, I guess is where I'm kind of coming down to. Like, I don't think the current state is acceptable.
Well, I would be comfortable with going ahead and approving their concept of this. And then obviously they're going to do a precise design and present that to us for review at a later date. So I think that's all they're looking for right now.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think that if we say, like the crossing does make sense, we have some additional, the vegetation, something to kind of warn cyclists, it's, the cars don't stop, and to ask for the beacons, I think that's feels right to me.
I think we ought to ask for a little bit more. I think maybe we could travel across Arrow Highway east of Indian Hill. You'll notice, like I was saying a little earlier, Claremont has a mid-block crossing right there. And I think it's very effective. And it's all about safety. That's what we're here for. And I think that would work great right there.
Is that similar to the one in downtown San Dimas on Bonita?
No, because that one in downtown San Dimas on Bonita is pretty much just like the one we have on Bonita by the PD on 3rd Street. This one's more of a actual signal light.
Oh, okay.
Triggered. It gets triggered by pedestrians crossing. They either, I'm not sure if it's a button push or they go into the laser and it triggers it, but it seems to be pretty darn effective. And it's also in the middle of a curve, so maybe we ought to take a look at that. A lot more money, but it's a lot safer.
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of some kind of lighting, and then let them take a look at it. I mean, in the end, it's kind of their dollars, I guess. We're saying we'd like to see, something more here.
But it does sound to me though, like Doug, you're saying that lifting the path out of the wash and onto this to a trail that's at grade with the road and the area around it is safer than leaving the trail down in the wash.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
I would say as drawn here is better than the current state. And,
Right.
and so like we could talk about how it could be even better, and I'm game for that. But I
Right,
don't want to lose track that the current state is really dangerous.
right, right. So this is a move towards safety, and we just have some ideas of potentially adding a few more safety elements.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I think a question for us is, I guess the question is, would this be at our expense then?
No,
No,
so this is,
county trail.
yeah, there is discussion about who would take over future maintenance. And I'll tell you, for me, I'm not a fan of taking on additional maintenance if we don't have to. But because this will be in our right of way, I envision that we'll end up having to do that. They did say that San Dimas has done some similar things to this, and San Dimas took on the future maintenance. But again, I typically will try to push back as much as I can, because again, we already have our own maintenance items. To add additional maintenance items to our staff is not fair to them, and it's not fair to the city to take on that burden. But again, this is technically a use for our residents as well. So just something to think about.
So I guess my question would be, if this ends up being, if they end up installing it and ours to maintain, are we really having the first of what should be multiple discussions? Because we're really setting a precedent here in that, we have many other streets which are busier than this, which have more users on the trail than this. So are we really, should we be saying to the county, yeah, and you should be making the other ones look like this as well?
Yeah, we can always propose that to them. Again, this is, something that they're gonna have to get funding for. And I think the goal is to eventually improve all of their trailways. Again, it's as they get funding, as they, prioritize, just like we prioritize as a city, they have to prioritize their own as well. So I think as part of this, we can always make the recommendation that we would like to see that throughout our city and see what they come up with. Again, they've done similar options in San Dimas, so there's no reason why they can't work with the city of Laverne.
Yeah, that'd be great, right? It's kind of an entry into a discussion that we needed to have anyway with them. Okay.
I've got a question to Anthony. I've purged a lot of information out of my old brain now. Exactly where is our city limit line in correlation to this?
I believe it's right there at the wash. Right at the wash.
That's what I was thinking. So if our city limit line, as I thought it was, the center of the wash,
Mhm.
then this is effectively out of our
That's correct.
city.
Right.
So
Is
the
it-
only thing that would be there would be the advanced warning traffic controls.
Is it in San Dimas Center, or is that really county land then?
It's county, I believe.
Yeah, so all of the land around it is county, obviously minus our pump station, and we've got UNLV, but the roadway, whenever I looked at it, that was part of our jurisdiction. That's where they came to us. But
I
everything
think,
else
isn't the Adobe part of Laverne?
Yes,
Yeah, that's our property.
but that is east of the channel,
Yes.
or is it?
No, it's west.
It is west of the channel?
Yeah,
It is.
it's that green spot right there on the north west corner.
Yeah, so this would be within our right of way. So again, we'd have to, depending on what kind of applications they put in, we would potentially have to maintain whatever they put in there. Even if they just go with the bare minimum, put up some signage and some paint for the crossing, that eventually would be a maintenance item for us. As we look at solar options and advanced warning, all that, again, those things would most likely end up falling under our jurisdiction for maintenance.
Well, along with maintenance, you are assuming liability should something occur there.
Correct?
Okay. Is there anything else on this one? Do we need to take any more concrete action than that, or is that what you needed, Sean? Just feedback?
That is all I needed. I appreciate everyone's feedback and thoughts. Thank you.
No, it was a good discussion, I thought. I thought
Yep.
it was good. Okay. Now it is Tracy next with the update on the active transportation plan.
That is correct. So very short, the active transportation plan approval is slotted to go to the Planning Commission on September 8th. And should it pass the Planning Commission, it will go to City Council on October 4th. Again, not set in stone. Oftentimes it kind of depends what's on the agenda. But that is currently the timeframe for the approval of the ATP, or final approval of the ATP.
These things take time, right?
They certainly do.
They certainly do. Okay. Tracy, and you're still not off the hook because you have the annual report card, which is kind of a carry on from our previous meeting.
That's correct. So what I have up on the screen is just a review of the annual reports. As a reminder, we discussed this previously. And the goal here is to kind of take the complete streets, which was adopted by Resolution 1771 back in 2017, and the Active Transportation Committee's duties, structure, and membership, which was adopted by Resolution 1936 in 2019. Both of those talk about reporting to City Council or progress reports, report cards, whatever you want to call it. So what I have on the screen now is just kind of a summary of what those resolutions talked about as far as reporting. If you look at item 1, the committee duties, it talks about a progress report, and it references walk, ride bicycles, transit, drive. And it talks about January of each year, the committee shall create a report to submit to City Council. And then we go over to the complete streets, item number 2. And that says, you know, a number of things, as you see by the bullet points: miles of bicycles, number of bicycle parking, linear feet of pedestrian improvements, ADA, etc. So there's a lot to report. And here it also talks about creating a report once a year. We talked last week about kind of coming up with something that could work for both formats. The beauty of it is I'm not going to recreate the wheel. So Doug submitted a suggestion, or Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, something that you've seen utilized other places.
I just said, I think something about this easy should work.
Right.
Simple,
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
So
just so you didn't have to just kind of work it from scratch.
exactly. So I didn't make any changes to Doug's submittal. I just wanted to provide you guys with a copy of what the Complete Streets and the ATC charter discusses as far as reporting. We may report on these issues. And then I gave you a copy of what Doug submitted. I didn't make any changes. I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to kind of take a look at this and see if this is along the lines of what you as a group want to move forward with. We can make changes, we can tweak it if you want, whatever you want. This is just a very basic introduction to what a report card might look like. So we've got it up there, you know, it talks about highlights and expectations. You know, what are the highlights of the previous year? What are we looking to do for the coming years? Talks again, you know, we've got bicycle pedestrian injuries. We can look at getting 5-year data, or we can just start and then continue that trend as we move forward. Doug suggested that we kind of use these maps that are already part of the ATP. So Doug was talking about the class 3. This is the map that shows that class 3 along Puddingstone. And, you know, we can look at adding, you know, to this map as we have projects that add bicycle improvements. You know, again, just an example of what this could look like, walking network, you know, our hiking trails, improvements. Again, I'm not so, you know, Doug, we haven't discussed this plan, next steps. I don't know what that looks like. I feel if there's something specific, a project that's pending, and, you know, I think this example of this Pudding Stone Crossing, obviously a project like that could certainly be like a plan, next step, work with LA County, yada, yada, yada kind of thing. So again, just throwing this out there is kind of a first rough draft. If you want to see it more specifically as far as a chart, you know, going back to, you know, the first page, some of these things we talked about, we can certainly make a chart. Send it to you guys, take a look. You can email the feedback to me. I can make changes. We can, again, you know, start coming up with a kind of finalized draft. If I get feedback within the next few weeks, we can probably even have an action item by the next meeting if I get the feedback, you know, in time.
Let me try to answer a couple of things, you because you kind of get stuck, you know, presenting it, and then like you're like, well, Doug, what do you think? So I'll go first, and I have a couple thoughts. One is there's these two requirements plus the active transportation plan listed a whole bunch more measurements. And if you remember when we went through the review, I said, is staff really signing up to report all these things? So in my mind, there's three different reports that have, you know, been talked about. The truth is, and I think as we talked last time, that's way too much work, right? And I think we need to start with something simple that we can do that isn't a ton of staff work. And the report card we produce is way better than three complicated ones that we don't. And that's kind of where we've been, right? Like we haven't actually produced the active transportation report card. I think we've missed a complete streets one, and there's no way we're going to do like a whole nother one. So I'm all about what's a simple one that we can do that tells the story fast with the least amount of work, and then we can approve it as we go along, right? But it shouldn't be a ton of staff work. And when it comes to what did we do, you know, I think that's simply kind of looking back in our decision log and, you know, looking at the things that we closed in our minutes, and that's the way we populate that. As far as what we're going to do, I think what I'd say to you is that should be like 5 bullets max, right? So it's not a list of projects. It's not a list, right? So it would be things like, it would be develop a new report and implement it would be something we plan to do this year. We're doing that right now, right? It would be prioritize the work listed in the active transportation plan and outline a plan to operationalize, right? Which is what we said. That's what it says in the active transportation plan, that we would do that, right? So those are kind of very high level things. They're not, you know, a list of projects and, you know, something really complicated. They're just kind of, you know, high level things, what our priorities are, what we're going to focus on, so that, you know, city council and others kind of know what our priorities are. But I mean, I think it's like 3 to 5 bullets, like that complicated. And in terms of the maps, I think what I said is Kittleson created the maps for us, right? So rather than create a whole list of projects that we did and what we're thinking about, like we should just, each time we add something, just update the map and print it again. And it's a graphic that we can use in many places. And, you know, it should be about that hard, I think, to produce the report card. I think that's a reasonable amount of effort. That was just kind of my thoughts.
Right. So that third item that you talk about is the performance measures in the ATP.
Mm-hmm.
And I see those more as project specific versus yearly. So that's why I kind of purposely left it out of here. If the group feels strongly about that, again, it's certainly something we can take a look at, but I see those kind of more specific to each project.
Yeah, I don't have them kind of memorized, but I'm super cautious about signing staff up to track a lot of metrics. I think it should be we ought to start with things that are pretty simple, like that are easy to get, that are probably, and we should maybe stretch ourselves a little bit here and there, but not like we could just go crazy tracking things. And I think we're much better off just tracking a few high level things, and getting better at them.
Right.
Can we go to the second page? I think it's something as simple as this. You've got the expectations that we've established or has been established for us either. And then the highlights, which would be what has been accomplished, or if it's a multi-year project, then we could put a progress report in there. But I do not want to overburden staff with, keeping track of how many trees were planted and how many trees were removed and signs and so forth. That is a department level thing. If we plan on replacing all the signs in the city at one time, then yeah, we need to advise council of that, because that'd be a huge budget item. But I think they just want to know what our accomplishments were compared to what our expectations were. Something as simple as that. We give them too much information, they're going to be lost in it, and they'll either be lost or ask a whole bunch of questions. And I don't think we want to do either one.
Yeah, so LD, actually, the one that we're looking at, I think when I sent it to Tracy, I said, I think this right here is acceptable in its level of detail, right? And so when it comes to like highlights, I just listed the highlights that came to mind.
Right.
And I think we probably agree with most of those. And when we look at next year, it says complete approval of the plan, prioritize the plan components and see how we can fit it into normal work, develop the strategy for implementing first mile, last mile, which I think is something we asked last week or last time. These are other things that we just asked for. And the last one is create the report card. So I think it's that level of granularity that I'm proposing. I think that's
Well, I mentored under a prior councilman that said, never give me a 2-page report. He always wanted all the details on a single sheet of paper that addressed what needed to be addressed. Lose all the fluff.
And I guess that all, in the end, if there's people demanding that, I guess staff would have to answer. Like, I don't know, has anybody asked you where the other report cards are? Because I don't know if they've even been asked for the report cards at all. So probably, producing a report card is a step forward, but I think there's always room for the appendix, right? And so you're right, LD, if they're like, I want more detail, like, okay, well, it's in the appendix.
Yeah, we'll have to be ready to answer any expanded questions, obviously.
So quick question on page 2, because I harmonize with the ideas that this be the report. It sounds like the bulleted items were created by Doug, which is fine. The injury piece, is that real, or is that just an example of what that report would look like?
It's real.
That's real Laverne data?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But, by keeping it like this, all it entails to update it is just to, look it up and add one more year to it, right?
Right. No, I'm fine with that. And then the left-hand chart or metric could be, added trail miles or something like that, right?
I'm not sure what you're talking about there, Mert.
Says the
I
placeholder.
apologize.
Placeholder.
Oh, the placeholder?
Yeah,
Okay.
it says active transportation growth 5-year trends. I mean, I don't know whether it'd be a 5-year trend or it would just be a active transportation growth, and we could just show either, miles of bicycle, miles of walking numbers that would just show over time that it's getting bigger.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I like the simplicity of that, Mert,
Right.
as opposed to a specific 5-year trend.
Right.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that suggestion.
Yeah, it's there as a placeholder because it's in our charter to grow active transportation. So right away, my first question is, well, how would I know if we as a group are being successful in meeting our charter? And if we're not, how do we know if we need to be doing something different? And so it's that metric that I think, we kind of, I'm looking for, but I don't know what it is, or I would have proposed one.
Well,
And
right.
I have some ideas. I have some ideas how it could be done, but I think we don't naturally collect it now. So I don't know the answer, and that's why there's just a placeholder. But I do think that growth in active transportation is kind of mentioned in our charter, and I think it's mentioned in the active transportation plan. So that's why it's there as a placeholder.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that if we sort of like you said early on, Doug, when you were talking about, and I don't know which chart it was, but it may start off with only 2 years of history, and then we may get a 3rd year of history down the road and a 4th year. So
yeah,
over time it'll build up, but initially it may not be 5 years worth.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that for that one, that should probably just be a separate discussion by itself, and that's why it's just there as a placeholder.
But I think this is a template that looks like it's a good beginning. So I'd encourage you to use it, Tracy, and roll with it.
Okay. So
That's my feedback.
thank you, Mert. So my concern for some of the improvements on the maps, sometimes they're so small that it's not going to view, on a map of this scale. So
I think just to interrupt, I think the maps are a different discussion. I think the report is just one page. But I heard what Doug's saying though, which is it would be helpful to have a map that we're managing and showing more and more as we grow, so that people can see an updated map and not a map from, and I'm going to exaggerate here, circa 1955, that kind of thing. So, but I think that's separate than the report.
And I think Tracy, for those things that don't visually show, you would just list them as a bullet item and describe them. They don't, even if they don't show, it would be just a bullet.
right. But I'm under the impression, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, all 3 sheets are what you would consider the report. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm proposing.
Okay.
The second to provide kind of a little more detail on actions that we took almost at the project level. But the reason the map is there is because it visually shows if we're growing the network or reducing the gaps. But even if they don't show visually on the map, there's just bullets there for like, yeah, here's the 10 things, here's things we did. We added sidewalks. We addressed the gap up on Golden Hills Road by adding sidewalks there. We improved the sidewalks on wherever that was else that we just did it. Caltrans improved the pedestrian crossings on Foothill Boulevard.
Then slight right onto Mapleview Street.
So even if, those may or may not actually show on the map, but they just become bullets of accomplishments.
Sure.
And you could probably run them off the top of your head, and populate it in like 10 minutes.
But wouldn't those items be redundant in the department's report?
Yes, so some of them would be. So I think the idea,
Continue on California 67th South for 5 miles.
Hey,
Yeah,
Tim, we can hear your navigation.
Well, I'm glad you can hear the navigation, so you can actually hear me, which is good. So, yeah, I just wanted to step in real quick because I'm in concurrence with everybody else regarding the, keep it simple, Sam. Make the report simple, changes you need to. So, just my 2 cents in there and add things as we go along. So, I'll go ahead and mute.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Yeah, so back to LD, so your comment is correct. A lot of those things are gonna be identical to what we're reporting as a department. And so I think that there will be some redundancy, but the way I read, what's supposed to be within this report, it's not something that this laundry list that we have to report, it's gonna be stuff that says we may report. And so I think it's really up to the committee to determine what they would want to report each year. I mean, generally speaking, we want to be consistent, but the idea is that I would recommend that if we have larger areas where we made significant progress in, that's what we really highlight, not, checking the box that we want to report, 15 or 20 different things. So
I agree.
I really think it's just going to be something where we're just very specific in what we're reporting and not just having this laundry list to check a box. So I say we just, a couple months before we either report this, we just say these are the 3 or 4 things we want to highlight. And again, most of that data we're probably going to have anyway. So I think that's my recommendation.
Yep, I agree with that. I agree with that. All right, Tracy, does that give you what you need?
Sure.
What should
Now run with it.
Would you like us to send you any other feedback after we had a chance to look at it and
Yes,
then,
absolutely. Please do so. Yeah.
and then maybe you'd said you'd bring it back then, kind of incorporating the feedback, and then ideally, if we're all pretty good, this would be the 2020 report card or 2021 report card.
Yes, 21. Yes.
Yeah, and you'd be done. as opposed to how I remember.
I would be.
As opposed to how I remember you having to work the first Complete Streets report.
Yeah, that shall not be mentioned.
We want to avoid that. Okay. All right, okay, so if anybody has any other kind of feedback, then I think Tracy would welcome it and she'll kind of boil it together and bring it back.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Anthony. You're next.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to get the video up here, not the video, but the picture before I start, so everyone can have a visual of what I'll be talking about. I'm sure, I would think that most people already know where it's at, but I just want to have the picture up here so you get a better idea.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Give me 1 second.
Okay, sorry, Trace.
Yeah, no worries. So here's one picture. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so this topic was presented to City Council at the March 1st meeting. And basically, it was resurrected at that time by the proposed 42 house development down on or off of Amherst, just west of Williams. The community there believed that with the 42 houses coming in, that additional traffic was going to be coming. They didn't want all of that traffic on Amherst. So they were asking us to remove this bulkhead, this island, so that additional traffic or the more traffic that we're going to have there, the traffic volume could be diverted up to Bodwin Street to go across. Now, this island was actually installed in 1984, and basically for that reason, that we were getting commuter traffic cutting across Bodwin there and traveling at a high rate of speed. So
this was, I'm sorry, this was pre-210, right?
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yes. And there's the other picture looking on Bodwin eastbound, and the one on the right side is on Williams looking westbound. So that's what it looks like today. It's been there since 1984. City Council directed us on March 1st to maintain the status quo with the closure of Bodwin, but also directed us to take it to the ATC and get their input, our input on what we think about it. So I'll just start it off. In my opinion, if that island was to be removed, we'd have to do some kind of traffic calming across Bodwin there, whether it be bulb outs, traffic, striping, speed bumps. I highly do not recommend. So I'll just kick it off with that and throw it out to everybody else. And I'd like to hear some input.
Okay, this was brought forth by the developer at Amherst and Williams.
Actually, the development EIR said that there was no warrant for us to remove that bulkhead there.
Right.
So real quick from the PD side, as you know, from that barrier all the way to Fruit, there's no stop signs. It's a straight shot. It's also an incline towards Fruit, which causes people to want to speed down that street. We do have a lot of complaints for speeders on Bodwin, particularly by one resident there. And I think that opening it up would cause more traffic and more speeders and more complaints. And like Anthony said, we'd have to do something to try to mitigate that that speed. It's a straight shot all the way from Williams to Fruit. So I think it would tend to have people want to speed just because of the way the street is designed at an incline and it's kind of wide.
Just also too, I'll add my comments. So I went out there and was talking with ILB. So they're doing work for Southern California Edison on that street. And I talked with them because they've been out there for several weeks. And I just kind of asked them what the traffic was like, what the speeding was like. And obviously they're doing construction, so people will typically drive slower. But they said traffic, there wasn't much traffic, and speeding wasn't too frequent. They say maybe in a 2 or 3 week period, they saw maybe 1 or 2 people in a couple weeks period. So I think to the point of the chief and Anthony is that if we do open this up, we're going to see significant increases in speed. We have kind of done some measures over the past year or so and trying to help mitigate some of that, but this will accelerate that issue.
So I'm in favor of saving the crepe myrtle, so I'm inclined to leave the whole thing up.
We had discussions with the homeowners during the time when the Amherst project was being proposed, and obviously they were against it. But at the same time, they wanted that thing opened up because they thought that the traffic was coming down Bowdoin, or Amherst, and then they wanted to open up Bowdoin so that they would release the traffic on them. But there's no statistical data that shows anything right now because, first of all, the track hasn't been built. And I think we left it at down the road that we'll address this when the Amherst project does come to fruition and monitor it then. But I'm in agreement with everybody. I'm in agreement with Muir, Anthony, Chief Paws, because right now you can't put speed bumps on that street. It's just not going to work. And I honestly, it's been working ever since 1984. It's just that the people were really upset because you know, Amherst project was gonna affect them, so they wanted, you know, Bowden Street to be opened on Williams, just because, and really not a lot of communication on that, but personally, I think we leave it alone and just wait and see what happens with the Amherst projects. And then at that point, we make, you know, look at it, study it, see what the police department, and yes, there is one individual that calls me all the time. Chief Paz and myself have discussed it many times. There's really, you know, there's only so many things you can do. They put, you know, those flashing signals to say slow down, and it's just, you know, people are complaining about cutting through on Amherst, going up to Bowden, get on the freeway, and blah blah blah. But I personally think we should leave it alone.
Thank you, Tim.
Doug, what about you?
I'm sorry, I didn't,
Comment, I had an
What
internet.
are your comments, Doug?
I agree with a lot of what was said. So I watched the city council meeting. I understand kind of the frustration. I went there, I've ridden my bike around it several different times, taken a lot of pictures. I guess I have a couple thoughts. I do think that the development is probably triggering the discussion. And I think in the city council meeting, I think there's discussion about separating, the two should be treated separate. And I agree with that. I also, I think that the right way to relieve traffic on Amherst is not to open a freeway lane down Boyden, right? And so like, hey, look, you know, there's fewer people on Amherst because we basically have a direct shot down Boyden. It's just moving the problem somewhere else. So I agree right away with what Anthony said, is that if, and that's an if this was to be removed, it should be done in conjunction with some significant changes within Bedoin, right? It needs to be a street in which it feels unsafe to go more than 25 miles an hour. So bulb outs, complexity, you know, the things that make it, that bring the scale of the street down so that it doesn't even feel rational to go more than 25 miles an hour through it, I think needs to be a contingency before you remove the barrier. I don't think you remove it the way it's designed now. I think that I think in aggregate, I think we should be looking to how we can just reduce the amount of traffic in general in the whole neighborhood. And I think that's what frustrates people. So I think when you look at them in aggregate, I can see where it's unfair to the people on Amherst, where, you know, if you live in a cul-de-sac off of Bedoin, you have to go down Amherst in order to cross over to get, you know, to Bedoin. And so you know, their argument would be like, hey, if it was shorter, like what we should be doing is just seeing if we can net reduce the amount of traffic that's moving around, the amount of vehicle miles traveled within the neighborhood. And I would try to package together and try to come up with a net reduction. But I'm with you. I don't think you remove this unless you significantly rethink the design of Bedoin. And I think you need to make it so that it is not an appealing area to cut through, right? Like, hey, that's a shortcut. Like, no, actually it's not. It's a slow way, you know, to get from Williams to Fruit. And until I think, you know, and that probably all has cost. And until we do, I don't think you simply remove this and open the gates.
They're asking us to respond to a perceived problem. We have a lot of traffic data currently with the current configuration. I think once the development goes in, if a legitimate problem does surface, then we look at the data at that time and react as needed at that time. I think if we remove it now and say that the development at Amherst and Williams does not generate the traffic patterns that the residents are up in arms about, then we ignore it. You know, once, I don't want to react to a problem before the problem occurs. So,
Agree with that.
I mean, I was on staff when this went in. There's also a similar one down at Fulton and 8th.
Grove.
Grove, rather,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Grove.
Yeah, Grove and Fulton. And they were both put in for the same reasons. If this goes away, you're gonna have tremendous speeding through there if we don't do some alternative street designs. So, but I would recommend that we just wait and see if a problem does develop.
At the end of that, does that give you what you need?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me, Doug?
I'm sorry, does that give you what you need?
I believe it does. I believe it does. Would you concur, Sean, or you want?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that that definitely helps us out. And I agree with everyone is that, you know, we're trying to solve a problem that, you know, really until the development is potentially done, we really don't know. And we have enough data currently that whenever that change does occur, we can actually compare data and see if there's a net change that needs to be made. So thank you.
Agree.
Yeah. Appreciate everybody's input. Very good.
Okay. I think that's the first time we've actually had a street problem brought to us. So I hope we didn't disappoint. I hope.
Well, as one on the city council, I would say, no, you didn't disappoint.
Phew.
This I think was the punt that council made that was hopefully going to reach wise minds, and I think a wise decision has been made.
Well, I will say too, I think Mr. Davis, you're the one that brought that up while we were talking about it, that this would be better to be addressed by the Active Transportation Commission. That's what we have, and I think that was a great suggestion. You know, especially with the vast amount of knowledge we have on everybody on this body here. It was a good call on your part. Thank you.
Okay, so that leaves us to the communications or roundtable, and trying to. I'll just if you have something, rather than just kind of call people out, if you have something, how about if you just raise your hand and speak out.
I have a question.
And Anthony, we're still looking at your picture, by the way. I think
That's me.
maybe Tracy's in control of that.
Nice photograph.
Yeah.
And now I finally know after 32 years how to pronounce the name of that street.
I've been corrected a bunch of times.
I call it Bedoin, but okay.
That wasn't what yeah, never mind.
It'll
Bold one.
continue on as a conflict of names.
Yes.
Okay, so who has items that they'd like to surface?
It sounded like Roy had one he wanted to bring up.
Yeah, there's been some concern expressed about the closure of the bike lanes on White Avenue, where SC Southern California Edison is going to be working for the next 6 months. Wondering if there's a solution. One of my friends suggested signs, you know, bikes may use full lane, or what's the other sign that says kind of the same thing, share the road. Personally, I'm not a big fan of those signs. I like Sharrows a little better, but I don't know if the city has plans to address that. What's that going to look? I've ridden through there twice in this last week. Not a big deal for me personally, but I have concerns for others that aren't quite as confident in the street as I am.
So Roy, is what you're asking is on White, where they're doing the under, Tracy, is that the Rural 20 job?
That's the Rural 28. Yes, that's correct.
That warms my heart. The
It should.
where they've closed the bike lanes because they obviously need to. They put up signs, multiple signs that the bike lanes closed, which I think they should be complimented for, because not every traffic control person even thinks to do that. And but basically the question is, where you're taking a buffered bike lane and moving the cyclist into traffic, should there be a sign warning cars that the cars will be on the roadway through that
Bikes will be on the
section?
roadway, yeah.
And I've definitely seen that, like if you're, especially if you're bicycle touring, where they're doing work, there'll be signs saying, the bikes are in the roadway because they're not in the lane anymore, right? Because their lane's been taken away. I don't know, I'll leave that to the staff if maybe
Yeah,
that was you're expressing that as a concern.
We can talk with the contractor. I know I've seen it before, but I thought that they did have a sign that said share the road, which I think Roy did say that he did see a sign. I don't know if that sign was out on white or if that was in a different location, but I thought they did have that sign out there. Again, those are temporary signs, temporary construction. So I mean, we can make sure that they do have those signs out there. Again, that's going to be up to the motorists and the bicyclists to follow those signs. So,
yeah.
That's the challenging part.
Okay.
Hey, Sean, just a comment. I was down there today. We were going over the Gold Line presentation and a little confusing on the road diet that they're doing. Understanding that they're going to cut that place up like Swiss cheese, but they need to be very careful because the car was in the wrong lane turning, and I don't know where that car came from, but make sure that the cones and stuff are marked correctly, and just to make sure you check with the contractors to make sure that because that's a very, very busy road, and there's a lot of cars that travel that to get to certain areas until they get into full scale construction, to make sure that they're majorly marked with the right size cones and make sure that there's markings and there's signage that tells people where to go. That's all I ask.
We will check into that and make sure the delineation is as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you,
John.
Okay, others? Someone else?
So
I've been
I had-
approached by
Go ahead, LD.
a dozen or so people that are confused with all the bike lane markings, in particular on Benita Avenue. The main question that I was given was at D Street, there's a big green band parallel with the crosswalk, and the people really don't know what that means. So I'm not sure how we could get public education out there, and that in itself is going to be impossible. But they don't know how to abide by the markings that are out there, other than stay away from the bikes when they're in the area. So, and the training too is not just for the vehicle motorists, but also for the bicyclist. So I'm not sure what's going to be the resolve to that, but I'm just passing on a concern from many that I've spoken with. So
Maybe the Laverne Bike Coalition can make the video and we can post it on the city's website as far as, what do these things mean to motorists and cyclists, and should someone wish to seek out that information, we can have it available on the city's website.
yeah. And then going back to White Avenue, I've had a couple of people in panic that they were doing this in preparation for the widening of White Avenue. So I said, no, don't even go there. So that's not the cause. And I explained the Rule 28 to them, and the purpose is this has been a long-standing project. So other than that, I have nothing.
Thank you.
Positive note, traffic has slowed down immensely on White Avenue in that area finally.
Oh yeah, it has.
Yeah, it's almost as good as those barriers that we're doing.
Yeah, LD, I agree, because I experience, the bike boxes with, on a bike as well as in driving a car. I can tell you from a bicyclist perspective, those are a huge improvement. at those intersections, right? And I know that people get confused and not everybody knows what to do, but those intersections in particular, and I would throw White in there as well, as a cyclist, were really confusing what to do. The bike lane led you to block the right so that you couldn't let people pass, but you couldn't move over to the other because everybody was up to the crosswalk line, so
Yeah,
bike boxes are used a lot, but they're new to us. And so that makes a lot of sense that we have a lot of people who aren't used to seeing them. And, it's just kind of a new experience, but man, does it make a difference in a bike, because I can move out of somebody's way so they can make a right hand. I don't have a whole line of cars behind me trying to make a right, frustrated. I'm like, well, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And it allows me to be polite to the drivers because it gives me the space to do so. And, but I know it's confusing to people who haven't seen them before. All right, others?
So I just want to refresh a couple discussion items that we had last meeting that I brought up on the first mile, last mile. I don't know what the latest on activities are around planning for that, or the discussions with the Gold Line. Maybe Candace might have some information to share with us at the next meeting, maybe, I don't know. But I'd like to, I think that this committee would be well apprised to be updated on any movements on the first mile, last mile in conjunction with the L line. And then also whether or not there's any consideration in the EIFD that might also be part of the first mile, last mile, or any of the enhancements there that might affect active transportation or touch on us. So those are two old things that I just want to keep carrying forward until we hear activity or see activity going on, so that we can include it into this. And then the other item that I want, Sean, you and Public Works to actually focus on, we've got D closed down right now, and D has diagonal parking, and I'm interested in having the city move to reverse diagonal parking, which is much safer and actually more convenient. Once again, this will be another learning exercise for the residents in the city of Laverne. But I'd like us to move towards reverse diagonal parking. And I guess I'd like this committee to weigh in. Should we do it a couple streets at a time? Because we really only have diagonal parking on 3rd Street in front of the university and on D Street. But then we do have a lot of parking lots that have diagonal parking. So the question I'd put to this group is, you think we should go big bang and try to do it all? Or should we start with the streets and then move to the parking lots?
so your thought is to remove the diagonal parking?
No, to reverse it so that you back into the sidewalk when you first come to the restaurant or the store. And then you're able to then drive out immediately without having to back into traffic to depart.
Well, the places where I've seen the reverse diagonal parking seems to work really well, because when I'm on my bicycle, the person pulling out of the parking spot can see me instead of being all the way at the other end of the parking spot trying to slowly back out and figure out if there's any traffic coming. When the car's turned around, you can see whether there's traffic coming or not.
Yeah, the studies I've seen show that reverse diagonal parking is significantly safer, to the tune of 200 to 300% safer than diagonal parking front end in.
Well, I know it works for the car shows.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I would support, I would definitely support any looking at implementing reverse angle parking. I think it's much better.
3rd Street in front of the university is especially challenging. To me, it's a perfect spot for that.
I think
very narrow.
I think 3rd is, but Mira, you were suggesting D since it's closed, and if we're going to reopen it.
Before we reopen D Street, I'd like to get at least D and 3rd Street in the works for flipping around.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So
And
if we have this committee's support, then I'm going to put pressure on management to have Public Works look at it and see what it would cost and how long it would take. Because I'd like to bring it to council before we open that section up.
We might want to also check with the downtown business district also here
Right.
before we do anything like that to make sure that that's amiable to them. I mean, if it's safe, that's great, but we need to check on them and run it through have staff and then run it through the divot and just see what their take is on it. You know what I mean? Make sure everybody's involved.
Oh, yeah. And the university, right.
Yeah, so just real quick, we can definitely look at that, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, but staff can get some general costs on what that would potentially take to get done and timelines. I mean, generally speaking, it should be a pretty straightforward project to take on. But I know that there is an action item coming to council on reopening that street pretty quickly. So I think timing wise, it might be a little bit challenging to get it all done, but again, we can try to work to get some costs associated with that as quick as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the planters and even some of the storm drain catch basins are configured at this particular alignment. If you reverse that, then the planters will have maybe be reconfigured.
Yeah, that'd be the biggest impact.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you would lose a space or two and have to use in order.
For the initial project, we may end up losing a spot or two, or maybe even a few more than that. I think as a trial, that would be the option, as we would have to sacrifice a few spots. And then long term, we could, bring something to council on what a potential cost would be to do improvements to that street to get the parking back to what it was. And then maybe give it a general refresh with, plant material and storm drain improvements, things like that.
Has the
My suggestion would be to kind of, Sean, if we could just do like a little drawing, just to show what it would be. That way, give them some visual. And that way, if this works out, and we are, like you say, we're going to be opening up D Street if the council approves that this next week by Wednesday or Thursday. So, but I would say a drawing to say how it looks. And then obviously the cost is very important. At least everybody have an idea what we're talking about.
We can do that.
One of the things that I notice when I'm at the grocery store or in one of the city parking lots, there's a high percentage of people that pull into the parking lot looking for a place where they can pull all the way through, so that they're already positioned to pull out, just like this reverse parking idea. The nose of the car is at the outside of the parking spot rather than the inside. So people are already choosing to park that way. We just don't maybe notice it.
I do think that it would be new to the area, and it probably needs to come with some education. I agree with what you said, Mir. I think study after study shows that it's a lot safer. It's a lot less disruptive to traffic flow.
Right.
Like to have people backing into traffic that's jammed, you kind of pull forward. And so there's all kinds of positive things about it, but it's different. And, I don't think we have tons of examples of it locally. So it would be, there's a learning curve to it, I think. Okay.
My only comment would be to Sean and Anthony, if you were to reconfigure and it was a possibility of losing a parking spot or two, then maybe you take that reduced dimensions and turn it into a motorcycle only parking spot. That would remove a motorcycle or two from taking up a full vehicle parking spot.
That's a great suggestion.
Yep. Motorcycle and bicycle parking space.
I always
dedicated to motorcycles. I'm okay with that too. Don't get me wrong, Tom.
Motorcyclists tend to back into their parking spot anyway, because pushing a motorcycle backwards out of a parking spot is not always easy.
Right.
And just real quick too, I want to go back to your comment on the first mile, last mile. So Metro, they're still finalizing their plan. There is some, I'll call it meetings over the next 2 or 3 weeks to go over how to apply for their grants for these projects. So I'm sure the city will be looking at how they can apply for this funding. So we can definitely get Candace in the next meeting to really give an update on where it stands. But that's the general update I have on first mile, last mile. Is Metro still hasn't finalized everything. So hopefully we'll have some more information at our next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Does the ownership of it reside still within community development? I guess, like when you
Yes.
mentioned Candace, so it's still, that's where it resides then. Okay.
Yeah, so the plan will reside with community development. When the actual physical projects are identified, that's when it would generally be handed over to Public Works to implement.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I have a couple. One is Muir brought up the first mile, last mile. I remember at the last meeting, so I'd like to keep this on the front burner. We also talked about the bike and pedestrian bridge across Arrow Highway. And so I get contacted about this fairly regularly. And in fact, so where we left off is, could we get an update on what this bridge is, what it looks like? It's not in, although it's a bike and pedestrian bridge, it's not in our active transportation plan. It's not in the first mile, last mile plan, and it's not in the Arrow corridor plan. So we probably kind of need to get caught up with what it is and what its intent and how it fits with all those other plans. And so where does the ownership for this bridge reside? I mean, who can give us an update on what this is and what the intent is and how it fits and what it looks like?
Sure. So I can give you a little bit of general background. The design hasn't been completed yet. There's been several renderings on how we go about this. It's not an easy design based off of constraints within city limits, metros, right of way, Fairplex ownership. It's very complex. And so that's part of the reason why, I won't call it a hush hush, but the idea is that we don't want to throw something out there and then come back and say, oh, it's changed, and then come back again, oh, say it's changed again. So there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. So I know we're getting close to a final rendering. And so, that will be going to council at some point, and then we can also bring it to ATC as an overview. But, this isn't something that has been truly finalized on where we're at with design, because again, it's very complex when you deal with ADA requirements, and then you deal with metro right away, city right away, and then the Fairplex. And then, there's a Fairplex project that's involved. There's a lot of moving parts in all of this. But as of right now, it generally sits within community development. Public Works obviously has a large portion of this because it is within public right of way, and it will, eventually, if it is built and owned by the city, then it will be ours to operate and maintain. So I know that's not exactly a great detailed overview, but generally speaking, it's in design, it's still in the works, and hopefully in the next month or two, we'll have something to present to council and to ATC. Does that work?
Yeah. If we could do that sooner rather than later, because I think I have copies of many of the designs, but every single copy I have is from somebody besides the city. So I'd love, to say, yeah, no, we're at least current and aware, because all this, I keep getting all this from outside, sending to me, asking for what my thoughts are, and I'd love to kind of channel some of that through this. But there's kind of a gap in our awareness and knowledge, I think.
Yeah,
I think we can get that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Sean. I think we can get that from the COG, what they have so far, if they're willing to give that up. And one caveat on this whole thing, we still don't have funding for that bridge yet. It is the design phase, which was funded, but we're working right now to get the funding for it. But I think we could get something from the COG, I think, Sean, don't you think?
Yes, we definitely can. I think the idea is we wanted to present something to council as well.
Yeah.
So again, these are preliminary designs. And, I mean, the COG of the city meeting regularly with, Pomona, Fairplex, and then the design consultant to make sure that we're all on the same page. Again, we have a lot of challenges we're working through. Again, it's not an easy thing when you start going over Metro's rail line. There's a lot of restrictions and requirements, so that changes design, that changes criteria, so it gets very complex and complicated. So I think we're kind of at the home stretch where we should be able to present something in the next, I'll call it, couple of months, so that everyone can really see where we kind of landed with a design that I think will be good for pedestrian, bicyclists, ADA requirements, while also fitting in, with a lot of the flavors. Edison is involved in this because of overhead lines. Again, it's a very complicated situation. So we had to work through a lot of different design criteria. So I think we'll have something in the next couple of months to present to the council on ATC.
Don, if I could ask you to share with me any particular design that comes across that looks like it's going to be adopted for that. I am affiliated with the Classic Car Place directly south of the train station there, metro station. So we have a personal interest in it. We are currently marketing our site. Our plan is to dissolve our business probably within 5 years. So we are hopefully marketing the site that something could be more beneficial in that area. So the combination of plans that we've seen in the past, one being the bridge and the other being a potential bus turnout that would drastically affect that property. We need to know the configurations of that as they become available. And that's self-serving to me. So.
Sure, yeah, and again, all those details haven't, even the bus turnout hasn't been finalized yet. There's been talks about having it, and there's talks about not having it. So there's a lot of, again, this is a very fluid conversation. And so, but yes, I think we'll be at a point where we can share design. So even if we take it to council, our meeting's going to be, I think our next meeting is scheduled for October. So if we get something in the next, month or two, we can still forward it to the group so they're aware that it is going to council.
Yeah, that'd be fine, because obviously we're not going to.
And we can discuss it further at ATC at our regular meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question, and it's just something that if you could investigate. When we implemented the gap closure project and all the bike lanes, one of the guidelines we used was that all the signalized intersections would use green hashing in the right-hand transition lanes wherever there was a signal. And so that's the way that was laid out. That works great, and so we've inserted a new signal at Durwood and White. So that's kind of been inserted into the existing bike lane. So my question is, would we be able to bring that up to the standard that we had all the other signalized intersections? Now that it's become a signalized intersection, will we be able to make that look the same as the other signalized intersections?
Yeah, we can look at that.
Because I think we should stay consistent.
Yeah, I agreed. I think part of that was that they didn't really touch the bike lane as you're coming southbound. That there was they didn't touch that stuff, wouldn't be part of the plan. But we could definitely look at that as an after process.
Thank you. And then we talked a lot about the trail crossing at Puddingstone, and Sean, I had mentioned to you I know that there's been discussions between the county and the city help put people in contact. But I think the people that use the trail often will identify the most dangerous crossing being the one where the trail crosses the entrance to, is it the Commons? Is it the Commons?
Yeah, the
shopping center, where the shopping center is. And so I think, I don't know if the city's been involved. I know that they gave some contacts. I think the county got in contact with the property owners because it's kind of the same. The property owners would need to make the change. I heard the property owners had said, well, we want to talk to the city before we make the change. And what was laid out, it's kind of a lot like what you saw, some kind of crossing, trimming vegetation because it's, completely overgrown there. So that's a really scary crossing, but I don't think those contacts are with the public works, so I don't know who the property owners are, but I know that the county and the property owners have been in discussions about that crossing as well. And in our active transportation plan, we show that as a crossing that needs to be enhanced. So I would say it's consistent with our plan.
Yeah, they've been talking with community development on that because that is private property, so that's going to be up to them to approve. So I believe they are working with community development on addressing that issue. So that's, again, my guess would be is that if it's the county's ability to do that, the county would work with the property owner to make that modification and do whatever betterments they need to do. Similar to what they're doing with Livingstone and us. They present it to us as the property owner, saying they want to, put crossings within our right of way. It'd be no different on private property. But yeah, you're correct. Public Works doesn't have any involvement in that because it is all within the private property. So, but I do know they are looking at addressing that issue. I think to your point with vegetation cutbacks and with some sort of stenciled crosswalk of some sort.
Yeah, and then we could show that as one piece of the active transportation plan implemented and show it as an accomplishment, and we didn't have to do anything.
Perfect.
Okay, so was there anything else? No? All right, then we're gonna conclude. Thank you, everybody. It was another good meeting, I thought. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, staff, everyone's input. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks a lot,
you.
buddy. Thank you.
Thanks. So long.
Thank you.